He thought she was just another black woman with an attitude until the most feared Navy SEAL trainer in America stepped out of her car. The flashing blue lights cut through the early morning fog like cold knives. On the shoulder of a quiet, suburban highway, a police officer stood tall, his hand resting on his holster, eyes narrowed at the woman sitting calmly in her black SUV. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice, just handed over her license, slow, deliberate, unbothered. But something about her calmness seemed to infuriate him even more. He barked orders she didn't deserve, voice sharp with arrogance. The moment was thick, a silence that carried decades of pain and pride. He didn't know yet the woman he was trying to intimidate was someone who trained the nation's strongest men to survive war. Her name was Commander Maya Jefferson, retired Navy SEAL trainer, known among her peers as the Iron Mind. After 22 years of service, she'd returned to her hometown in Virginia, hoping to live quietly, away from noise, ranks, and medals. That morning she was simply on her way to visit her sister, a cup of black coffee in her hand, her playlist humming soft blues through the car's speakers. The highway was empty, the world peaceful, until she saw the red and blue lights flashing behind her. At first she thought nothing of it. Maybe she'd gone a few miles over the limit. She pulled over, rolled down her window, and waited. Calm, disciplined, respectful. But the officer who approached wasn't calm. He was restless and carrying a bitterness he didn't yet understand. His nameplate read, Officer Daniels, a man with something to prove. When he saw her, a black woman behind the wheel of a new SUV, his posture shifted. He didn't see a veteran. He didn't see a hero. He saw a stereotype. His tone changed. His authority swelled. "License and registration," he demanded coldly. Maya handed it over, silent. Years of military training taught her restraint, to measure before reacting. But inside she could feel the old weight pressing down, that same old injustice that refused to die, no matter how many medals she earned. She watched him walk back to his car, shaking his head, muttering something under his breath. It wasn't the first time she'd been treated like this. But she didn't know yet. Today her patience would be tested far more than ever before. Minutes passed. The officer stayed in his cruiser too long. And suddenly he stepped out again, not with a ticket, but with a tone that carried accusation. He claimed her plates were suspicious, that the car didn't match her profile. He asked her to step out. Maya complied. Calm. Silent. The camera on his vest blinked red, recording everything. He circled her SUV like a predator assessing prey, throwing casual insults masked as questions. "Nice car. Yours? Where'd you get the money for something like this?" Each word dripped with the assumption that she didn't belong. Maya stood tall, posture unshaken, hands visible, voice measured. Her years of military training had taught her to handle pressure, even when it burned. A small crowd began forming nearby, drivers slowing down, watching from a distance, a mother recording quietly from her car window. The air thickened. The officer's words became harsher. He accused her of resisting even though she hadn't moved. His hand hovered near his weapon, a gesture meant to remind her who had power. But she didn't flinch. She looked him in the eye, not with anger, but with the quiet strength of someone who'd seen far worse than arrogance in uniform. He didn't know she'd spent years training SEALs to endure torture, pain, and survival in war zones. He didn't know she'd once led rescue operations under enemy fire. To him, she was just another black woman with an attitude. The tension snapped. when another patrol car pulled up, a senior officer stepping out, confusion on his face. "What's going on here?" Daniels puffed up his chest. "Suspicious driver, uncooperative." The senior officer turned to Maya and froze. Recognition hit like lightning. He'd seen her before, in training facilities, in classified reports, in photographs framed on the walls of military bases. "Commander Jefferson?" he asked quietly. Daniels blinked. "Commander?" Maya didn't move, just stood there, calm, dignified. The senior officer straightened immediately, his tone respectful now. "Ma'am, I had no idea. You trained my cousin at Coronado. He said you changed his life." Daniel's face drained of color. The same arrogance that once burned in his chest now crumbled into humiliation. But Maya didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, in a tone soft enough to shame stone, "Respect shouldn't depend on titles." The moment hung heavy in the air, the kind of silence that reveals more truth than words ever could. The senior officer stood stiff, clearly uncomfortable with what had just unfolded. Daniel's eyes darted between them, panic slowly replacing his defiance. It was too late. The cameras were still rolling, the crowd was still watching, and Maya, still composed, still unbroken, became the image of quiet, righteous power. The senior officer ordered Daniels to stand down and step aside. As Daniels fumbled with excuses, Maya turned to him, not to humiliate but to teach. "You wear that badge to protect, but when you use it to control, you don't serve, you dishonor the oath you took." Her words were precise, measured, the kind that cut deeper than shouting ever could. She could have demanded his badge, she could have made a scene, but she didn't. Her restraint was her message. Her silence was her authority. The senior officer offered to escort her, but she simply nodded and returned to her car, leaving Daniel standing on the side of the road, staring at the ground, the badge on his chest suddenly heavier than it had ever felt. For the first time, he understood what true discipline looked like, and it didn't come from power or fear or the right to command. It came from composure, from courage, from character. And in that moment, the man who thought he owned the situation realized he'd just been schooled by someone who lived by a higher code, one that he'd never even learned. Later that week, the video went viral. Millions watched as the calm, disciplined woman faced down arrogance and prejudice, not with anger, but with strength. Headlines called her the Silent Storm. Veterans recognized her instantly. Former SEALs flooded the comments, sharing stories of how she trained them, inspired them, rebuilt them. And yet through all the praise, Maya stayed quiet, never sought attention, never demanded apology. When asked by reporters why she hadn't pressed charges, she simply said, "Because some lessons can't be taught in courtrooms." As for Daniels, he was suspended, sent to retraining, and later reassigned to community work. There he met families, children, and neighbors who helped him see the world differently. He never forgot that day on the highway, the day he met a woman who didn't just teach soldiers, but taught him what respect really means. In time, he would admit that was the day his badge finally meant something. Because sometimes, justice doesn't arrive in handcuffs or headlines. Sometimes, it walks away quietly, leaving behind only the echo of dignity and the sting of realization.